Keep him deaf. Forever. Anthony Castellano slid $50,000 across the doctor's desk, his eyes cold as lake water in January. My brother never finds out. You understand, never. Dr. Harold Patterson stared at the money. His hands trembled as he reached for it. This is wrong. Vincent trusts me. Your father trusted me. My father is dead, and Vincent will trust you even more after you tell him there's nothing wrong with his ears. Anthony leaned forward, his smile never reaching his eyes. 50,000 every year, Harold, for as long as my brother lives. All you have to do is keep that blockage right where it is. That conversation happened 23 years ago. For 23 years, Vincent Castellano ruled Chicago's underworld in complete silence, never knowing that his own brother had stolen his hearing for profit and power. But today, a black maid from the South Side would accidentally uncover the betrayal of a lifetime. And when Vincent Castellano discovered the truth, the streets of Chicago would run red with consequences. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will shake you to your core. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. The phone rang at 3:47 in the morning. Vincent Castellano was already awake. He hadn't slept a full night in 15 years. When you controlled half the crime in Chicago, sleep was a vulnerability you couldn't afford. He grabbed the phone and answered the video call. Marco's face filled the screen, lips moving rapidly with information Vincent needed to read. "Slow down," Vincent commanded. "Again, from the beginning." Marco exaggerated his words, speaking the way everyone spoke to Vincent, like he was a child learning to read. The Bertolini family had hit 3 warehouses near the docks, 2 guards in the hospital. 1 might not make it. Vincent's jaw tightened. Who gave the order? Nobody knows yet, boss. But Donnie Bertolini's kid has been running his mouth all week about making a name for himself. Find him. Already on it. No. Find him and bring him to me. Alive. I want to have a conversation. Marco nodded. What about the Bertolini family? Should we hit back? Not yet. I want to know if this was business or personal before we start a war. Vincent paused. Where's my brother? Anthony. He went home around midnight, said he had an early meeting. Something flickered in Vincent's chest. Not suspicion exactly, more like a shadow that had been following him for years without ever taking solid form. He dismissed it as he always did. Tell him I need him here by 9. We have decisions to make. Got it, boss. The screen went dark. Vincent sat alone in his bedroom, pressing his hand against his right ear, the way he had done 10,000 times before. The gesture had become unconscious, automatic, like breathing. Every morning he woke up hoping that somehow miraculously sound would finally reach him. It never did. The doctors had explained it when he was 6 years old. Congenital hearing loss, permanent nerve damage, nothing to be done. His father had taken him to specialists across the country, New York, Los Angeles, Houston, Miami. The verdict was always the same. Vincent Castellano would live his entire life in silence. He had accepted this fate at age 12, sitting in Dr. Patterson's office, while the kindly physician delivered the same diagnosis his father had already heard a dozen times. I'm sorry, son. Some things just can't be fixed. Vincent had nodded dry-eyed and walked out of that office a different person. If the world was going to give him silence, he would turn that silence into power. He would build an empire so vast, so feared, that no one would ever see his deafness as weakness, and he had succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. But success, Vincent was about to learn, came with a price he had never suspected. By 8:30 that morning, Vincent was in his study, reviewing financial reports. The Castellano mansion sprawled across 3 acres of Lakeshore Drive property, 32 rooms of marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that had been acquired from collectors who no longer had use for beautiful things. Security cameras covered every angle. Armed guards patrolled every entrance. The house was a fortress designed to keep enemies out. It had never occurred to Vincent that the real enemy might already be inside. Mrs. Benedetti knocked twice before entering, her silver hair pulled back in the severe bun she had worn since Vincent was a teenager. "The new housekeeper is here for orientation." She signed, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Grace Williams, background check is clean." Vincent barely glanced up from his papers. "Standard protocol. Keep her away from this floor for the first week." "There's something else." Mrs. Benedetti hesitated. "She asked to learn sign language, said she wanted to be able to communicate with you directly if needed." This caught Vincent's attention. New staff members usually avoided him entirely, preferring to work through intermediaries rather than face the discomfort of his disability. In 20 years, not a single housekeeper had volunteered to learn sign language. Interesting. What do we know about her? Widowed 3 years ago. Husband was shot during a convenience store robbery on the South Side. 2 children, a boy, 14, and a girl, 11. Both in public school. She's been working double shifts to keep them in a decent neighborhood. Vincent nodded slowly. "A survivor. That's one word for it. Send her up. I want to meet her." Mrs. Benedetti's eyebrows rose slightly. Vincent almost never met household staff personally, but she knew better than to question. "Yes, sir." 5 minutes later, Grace Williams stood in the doorway of Vincent's study. She was not what he expected. Mid-30s, with the kind of bearing that came from surviving things that would break most people. Her uniform was pressed and clean, her hands folded in front of her, her posture straight without being rigid. But it was her eyes that caught Vincent's attention. They met his directly, not with fear, not with challenge, but with a quiet steadiness that suggested she had looked at worse things than Chicago's most dangerous crime boss. "Mr. Castellano." She spoke slowly and clearly, understanding that he would need to read her lips. "Thank you for this opportunity. Mrs. Benedetti tells me you want to learn sign language." "Yes, sir. I figured if I'm going to work in your house, I should be able to talk to you properly." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise her. "Sir, why bother? Most people in your position would be happy to stay invisible. Collect your paycheck, do your job, go home to your kids. Why make extra effort for someone like me?" Grace was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her words were careful but honest. "My husband couldn't hear for the last 6 months of his life. Doctors said it was from the gunshot damaged something in his head. He hated not being able to hear our kids laughing." She paused. "I learned some sign language to talk to him during those months. It wasn't much, but it made him feel less alone. I guess I don't think anyone should feel alone because other people can't be bothered to learn how to reach them." Vincent studied her face for a long moment. There was no artifice in her expression, no calculated attempt to win his favor. She was simply telling the truth about why she cared. It had been a very long time since someone told Vincent the truth. "Mrs. Benedetti will show you your duties," he said finally. "Welcome to the household." "Thank you, sir." Grace turned to leave, but something made her stop at the doorway. Her head tilted slightly, and Vincent saw her brow furrow, as if she had noticed something that puzzled her. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Grace shook her head quickly. "No, sir. Nothing. Sorry." She disappeared down the hallway. Vincent stared at the empty doorway for several seconds, wondering what she had seen. Anthony arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, breezing into Vincent's study with the confident energy that had made him invaluable to the family business. "Hell of a night," he said, settling into the leather chair across from Vincent's desk. "Bertolini's really stepped in it this time. Word on the street is, old man Bertolini didn't authorize the hit. His grandson went rogue trying to prove himself." Vincent watched his brother's lips carefully. "What do you recommend?" "Let me reach out to Sal Bertolini directly. Feel him out. If the kid acted alone, we take it out of his hide and call it even. No need to start a war over some punk's ego." "And if Sal authorized it?" Anthony's smile didn't waver. Then we remind the Bertolinis why no one crosses the Castellano family. Vincent nodded slowly. This was how their partnership had always worked. Vincent made decisions. Anthony executed them. Vincent stayed in the shadows. Anthony moved through the light. Vincent was the brain. Anthony was the voice. For 20 years, this arrangement had served them both. But lately, something had been gnawing at Vincent. A feeling he couldn't quite name. The sense that pieces were missing from puzzles he hadn't known existed. "There's something else," Vincent said. "The new housekeeper. The black woman Grace something. Grace Williams. She lost her husband 3 years ago. Shot during a robbery." Anthony's expression remained neutral. "Sad story. Chicago's full of them. She asked to learn sign language so she could communicate with me directly." Something flickered across Anthony's face there and gone so fast that Vincent almost missed it. Almost. "That's thoughtful of her," Anthony said carefully. "Most staff don't bother." "No, they don't." The brothers held each other's gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Then Anthony stood adjusting his jacket with the easy confidence that came from a lifetime of getting what he wanted. "I should get moving on the Bertolini situation. I'll have answers for you by tonight." "Do that." Anthony paused at the door. "Hey, Vincent. You seem different today. Something on your mind?" "Just business." "Okay. Well, you know where to find me if you need to talk." He left, and Vincent found himself staring at the closed door with that nameless feeling growing stronger in his chest. Something was wrong. He just didn't know what yet. 4 days passed. Grace Williams moved through the mansion like a ghost, exactly as she had been instructed. She cleaned, organized, polished, and disappeared without leaving a trace. The other staff members barely acknowledged her existence. The guards looked through her as if she were furniture. But Vincent noticed her. He noticed the way she observed everything, not with suspicion, but with the careful attention of someone who had learned that details mattered. He noticed how she worked efficiently, but never rushed, how she treated expensive antiques with respect, but not reverence, how she seemed completely unafraid of the dangerous men who surrounded her. Most of all, he noticed how she kept glancing at him, not at his face, at the side of his head. The first time he caught her doing it, he dismissed it as curiosity about his hearing aids, though he didn't wear any, having given up on them decades ago. The second time, he thought she might be looking at something behind him. The third time, he realized she was staring at his right ear with an intensity that made no sense. On the 5th day, he summoned her to his study. "Close the door," he said when she appeared. "Sit down." Grace obeyed her posture, revealing nothing but calm readiness. "You've been watching me," Vincent said. "Not my face, my ear. Why?" Most people would have stammered, deflected, made excuses. Grace Williams simply met his eyes and told the truth. "Because something doesn't look right, sir." "Explain." "I don't have medical training. I'm just a housekeeper. But I spent 6 months watching doctors examine my husband's ears, trying to figure out why he couldn't hear anymore. I learned what healthy ears are supposed to look like." She hesitated. "Yours doesn't look right. There's something in there, something that shouldn't be there." Vincent's heart beat faster. "I've been examined by specialists for over 30 years. They've all said the same thing: permanent nerve damage, nothing to be done." "I'm not saying they're wrong, sir. I'm just saying I can see something. Deep in your ear canal. Dark. Compacted. Like buildup that never got cleaned out." "That's impossible." "Maybe. But I know what I see." Vincent stared at her for a long moment. This woman, this stranger, was claiming to see something that dozens of doctors had missed. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was probably a waste of time. But Grace Williams had no reason to lie to him. She had no angle, no agenda, nothing to gain from making false claims about his medical condition. She was simply a widow from the South Side who had learned to pay attention because attention was sometimes the only thing keeping her family alive. "Can you remove it?" Vincent heard himself ask. Grace's eyes widened. "Sir, I'm not a doctor. I could hurt you. I could make things worse." Answer the question, do you think you could remove it? Maybe. If it's just build up like wax or debris, then yes. My grandmother used to clean our ears when we were kids. She said doctors made everything too complicated. But if it's something else, something medical, then no. I could cause serious damage. Vincent stood and walked to the window, his back to her. The city stretched out below him. His city. The empire he had built in silence. Every street corner, every building, every life that moved through those streets belonged to him in some way. And all of it had been managed through a filter of silence, through interpreters and lip reading and the constant effort of piecing together a world that everyone else experienced effortlessly. What if it didn't have to be that way? What if one woman from the South Side could accomplish what specialists had declared impossible? He turned back to face her. Do it, sir. I've spent 37 years deaf. If there's even a chance, even the smallest possibility that you're right, I need to know. He walked back to his desk and sat down, tilting his head to give her access to his right ear. Do it now. Grace stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she approached him. This is crazy. Maybe, but crazy is better than wondering for the rest of my life. She positioned herself beside him, her fingers hovering near his ear. If I hurt you, you won't. How do you know? Because you're the first person in 30 years who bothered to look. Grace took a deep breath and began. Her touch was gentle, nothing like the cold clinical probing of doctors who had examined him throughout his life. She worked slowly, carefully, her fingers moving with the precision of someone who understood that what she was doing mattered. Vincent felt pressure in his ear canal, a shifting sensation, something being loosened that had been settled for decades. There's definitely something here, Grace murmured. It's deep, really deep, compacted hard. Can you get it? I'm trying. It's... She adjusted her angle, applied gentle but firm pressure. Almost. Got it. And then something gave way. Vincent felt a pop like a seal breaking, a rush of sensation that made his whole skull vibrate with sudden, overwhelming pressure. Grace stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. In her palm sat a small dark mass, waxy, compacted the accumulation of decades. Vincent opened his mouth to ask what had happened. And then he heard his own breathing. The sound was alien, terrifying, beautiful beyond description. Air moving through passages that had been blocked since childhood, creating a rhythm he had only ever felt, never heard. His heartbeat followed a steady thump, thump, thump that seemed to shake his entire body with its sudden, magnificent presence. "Oh my God," Grace whispered. Her voice. He was hearing her voice. The actual sound of another human being existing not as shapes on lips, but as vibrations traveling through air, entering his ears, reaching his brain, connecting him to the world for the first time in 37 years. Vincent's hands flew to his head. His eyes went wide. His chest heaved as he struggled to process the impossible tsunami of sound that was crashing over him. The grandfather clock in the corner exploded into existence, tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. A heartbeat he had only felt through floorboards, now thundering in his consciousness. The city beyond his windows erupted with sound. Car horns, sirens, construction equipment, voices shouting, engines, rumbling, the endless symphony of urban life that had been playing around him every day without his knowledge. His own voice emerged as a broken whisper. "I can hear." The words hung in the air between them, more precious than any treasure in his mansion. "I can hear," he repeated, tears streaming down his face. "I can hear." Grace was crying, too overwhelmed by what she had accidentally accomplished. "Mr. Castellano, I don't understand. How could the doctors have missed this? It was right there. I could see it from 3 feet away." The question cut through Vincent's euphoria like a blade. She was right. How could they have missed it, doctor? Patterson had examined him every year for 23 years. Specialists across the country had looked into his ears, run tests, delivered diagnoses. Every single one of them had concluded that his deafness was permanent, untreatable, a fact of his existence. But Grace Williams had fixed it in 30 seconds. Either every doctor he had ever seen was incompetent beyond belief, or someone had paid them to keep him deaf. Vincent's tears stopped flowing. His expression hardened into something that made Grace take a step backward. "Mr. Castellano, are you okay?" "No." His newly awakened hearing caught every nuance of his own voice, the cold fury that was building beneath the surface. "I don't think I've been okay for a very long time." "I don't understand." "You will." Vincent stood, and for the first time in his life, he heard the creak of his leather chair, the rustle of his suit, the click of his shoes against marble. "But first I need you to promise me something." "Anything." "What happened here, what you just did, stays between us. You don't tell anyone. Not Mrs. Benedetti, not the other staff, not your children, not your priest. No one." "Why?" "Because if I'm right about what I'm thinking, someone has been stealing my hearing for decades. And if they find out you've restored it before I'm ready to deal with them." He let the implication hang in the air. Grace swallowed hard. "I understand." "Good. Now go back to your duties. Act normal. I'll contact you when I'm ready." She nodded and turned toward the door. At the threshold she paused. "Mr. Castellano, whatever you're about to do, be careful. Whoever did this to you, they've been hiding it for a long time. People don't hide things that well unless they're dangerous." "I know," Vincent said quietly. "That's what I'm counting on." Grace left, and Vincent stood alone in his study, surrounded by sounds he had never known existed. The truth was out there somewhere. In medical records, bank statements, whispered conversations that he could finally hear, and he was going to find it, no matter who had to pay. The call to Dr. Patterson's office went through at 4:00 p.m. Vincent had never experienced a phone call like this. The electronic ringtone, the click of connection, the receptionist's voice high, slightly nasal, professionally pleasant. "Dr. Patterson's office. How may I help you?" "This is Vincent Castellano. I need to see the doctor today." The pause on the other end was almost imperceptible, but Vincent caught it now, the slight intake of breath, the rustle of papers as nervous hands fumbled with the schedule. "Mr. Castellano, the doctor's calendar is quite full today." "Tell him it's an emergency. Tell him I'll be there at 6. Yes, sir. I'll relay the message." "Good." He hung up and sat in the gathering darkness of his study, listening to the symphony of sounds that surrounded him. The hum of electricity through walls, the distant murmur of staff in other rooms, the mechanical whisper of security cameras adjusting their angles. His world had suddenly become three-dimensional in ways he was still struggling to comprehend. At 5:45, he put on his coat and walked toward the front entrance. Marco appeared in the hallway, lips already forming the exaggerated words that Vincent no longer needed. "I can hear now," Vincent said quietly, stopping his lieutenant mid-gesture. "Don't ask how. Don't tell anyone. Just talk normally." Marco's face went slack with shock. "Boss, what are you? You heard me? Speak." Okay." Marco's voice was deeper than Vincent had imagined, roughened by years of cigarettes and whiskey. "Where are you going?" "To see Dr. Patterson. I have questions about my medical history." "You want backup?" "No. This is personal." Something flickered across Marco's face, concern maybe, or something darker. "Your brother called while you were working. He wanted to know when you'd be free." "What did you tell him?" "That I didn't know." "Good. If he calls again, tell him the same thing." Vincent continued toward the door, leaving Marco staring after him with an expression of profound confusion. The night air hit Vincent's face as he stepped outside carrying sounds he had never noticed before. The chirp of winter birds, the crunch of gravel beneath tires, the distant wail of a police siren cutting through the darkness like a knife. His driver opened the car door. Even that simple sound, the click of the handle, the whisper of hinges, was a revelation. "Dr. Patterson's office," Vincent said, settling into the back seat. The driver nodded and pulled away from the mansion. As the car moved through Chicago's streets, Vincent watched the city scroll past his window while listening to it for the first time. The rumble of the engine, the hiss of tires on wet pavement, the muffled thump of bass from a passing car's sound system. For 37 years, this world had existed without him. For 37 years, he had navigated it through vibrations and lip reading and the constant effort of piecing together what others experienced effortlessly. Now, he could hear it all, and someone was going to answer for keeping it from him. Dr. Patterson's office occupied the penthouse floor of a building that Vincent had helped finance 15 years ago. The irony was not lost on him as he stepped into the elevator and listened to its mechanical hum for the first time. The receptionist's eyes widened when he entered the waiting room. Vincent could hear her nervous breathing, now could detect the slight tremor in her voice when she spoke. "Mr. Castellano, the doctor is finishing with another patient. He'll be with you shortly." "I'll wait." He sat in one of the leather chairs, listening to sounds he had never noticed during previous visits. The tick of the wall clock, the whisper of air through ventilation ducts, the distant murmur of Dr. Patterson's voice through the closed door of his examination room. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Patterson emerged with his practiced smile, the same smile Vincent had seen for 23 years. Silver hair perfectly styled, gold-rimmed glasses catching the overhead light, expensive suit tailored to project competence and trustworthiness. "Vincent, good to see you. Come in, come in." But Vincent was listening now, and what he heard didn't match what he saw. Patterson's breathing was too fast. His footsteps carried hesitation. His voice held a tremor that his confident expression tried desperately to hide. They entered the examination room together. Vincent settled into the familiar chair while the doctor prepared his instruments, hands moving with mechanical precision. "So what brings you in today?" Patterson asked. "Your annual checkup isn't for another month." "I want you to examine my ears." Of course, of course." The doctor reached for his otoscope. "Any particular concerns?" "Just being thorough." Patterson approached with the instrument. Vincent watched his face carefully as the doctor positioned the otoscope and peered inside his right ear. The reaction was immediate. Patterson's hand jerked slightly. His breathing stopped for a moment, then resumed at twice its previous pace. His face lost several shades of color beneath the professional lighting. "Is there a problem, Harold?" The doctor pulled back from the examination. His hands were trembling now, and Vincent could hear the slight vibration in his voice. "Vincent, why, there's been a change." "What kind of change?" There was significant blockage in your ear canal. Accumulated debris. It appears to have been removed." "Removed? What blockage?" Patterson's eyes darted toward the door as if calculating escape routes. "There was material. Impacted. Deep in the canal. It's been affecting your hearing for some time." "How long is some time, Harold?" The doctor didn't answer. Vincent stood slowly, and for the first time in his life, he heard the threat in his own movement, the whisper of expensive fabric, the controlled click of Italian leather against tile, the deadly quiet of a predator approaching prey. "Let me ask you a different question," Vincent said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you known that blockage was there?" Patterson backed against the examination table. Medical instruments rattled with the impact, and Vincent heard every single sound of the doctor's terror. "Vincent, please." "How long, Harold?" "I can't." Vincent's hand shot out and closed around the doctor's throat, pinning him against the table with controlled violence. The instruments crashed to the floor, a symphony of metal and plastic and desperate fear. "I can hear everything now," Vincent said quietly. "Every tremble in your voice, every skip in your breathing, every lie you're about to try to tell me. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and you're going to tell me the truth. How long have you known about the blockage?" Patterson's eyes bulged with terror. His hands clutched at Vincent's wrist, but they both knew the power dynamic in this room. 23 years, the doctor gasped. "Since you were 14. The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. 23 years. He had been deaf for 23 years longer than necessary. His entire adult life built on a lie that this man had maintained while collecting payment for his expertise. "Why?" Vincent demanded. "Why would you do this to me?" "I didn't have a choice. He paid me. He paid me to keep you deaf. Said it was for your own protection. Said you'd be safer if you couldn't hear." Who paid you?" Patterson's voice broke into desperate sobs. "Your brother. Anthony paid me $50,000 every year for 23 years. He said it was the only way to protect you. He said if you could hear, you'd never need him. He'd lose his place in the family business. He said—" The doctor's words dissolved into incoherent weeping, but Vincent had stopped listening. His brother. Anthony. The man he had trusted more than anyone else on earth. The man who had served as his voice, his translator, his connection to a hearing world. The man who had positioned himself as indispensable for 2 decades. His brother had stolen his hearing. Vincent released Patterson's throat, and the doctor collapsed against the examination table, gasping for air. 23 years, Vincent said, his voice hollow. Every negotiation, every meeting, every conversation I couldn't hear directly. It all went through Anthony. "I'm sorry," Patterson sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I knew it was wrong, but the money—" "The money." Vincent's laugh was bitter empty. "My hearing was worth $50,000 a year to you. That's— what? A little over $1 million total. I'll give it back. Every cent. I'll do whatever you want. What I want is 23 years of my life back." Vincent walked toward the door. "But since I can't have that, I'll settle for the truth. All of it. Every payment, every conversation, every piece of evidence. You're going to write it all down. And then you're going to disappear. Leave Chicago. Leave the country. Because when I'm finished with my brother, I'm going to remember everyone who helped him steal my life." He paused at the door. "One more question, Harold. The other specialists I saw over the years, the ones in New York, Los Angeles, Houston. Did Anthony pay them too?" Patterson nodded miserably. "He handled everything. Said he was protecting you. Said the family needed him to be your voice. Said what?" "Said you'd thank him someday. For taking care of you." Vincent stood motionless for a long moment, absorbing the final piece of his brother's betrayal. Taking care of him. That's what Anthony had called it. Keeping Vincent deaf-dependent, filtered through translations that Anthony controlled, that was taking care of him. The rage that filled Vincent's chest had no sound, but if it did, it would have been a roar that shook the foundations of the building. "Write it down," he said quietly. "I'll send someone for the documents tomorrow." He walked out of the examination room, out of the office, into the elevator that hummed with mechanical precision. The city spread out below him through the building's glass walls, his city, his empire built on lies he was only now beginning to understand. In his pocket, his phone buzzed. Anthony's name glowed on the screen. Vincent stared at it for a long moment, listening to the electronic hum of the incoming call. His brother's voice would be on the other end, the voice that had shaped his understanding of the world for 20 years. He answered. Vincent. Anthony's voice was casual, relaxed, the voice of a man who believed his secrets were still safe. "Marco said you had some kind of emergency. Everything okay?" Vincent closed his eyes. For 23 years, this voice had filtered his reality. For 23 years, he had trusted this voice with everything he had. Now, he could hear it clearly, and what he heard was a stranger. "I'm fine," Vincent said carefully. "Just needed to see Patterson about something." "Anything serious?" "No, routine checkup." Good. Anthony paused. "Listen, I've been working on the Bertolini situation. I think I've got something promising. Maybe dinner tomorrow night to discuss, just the two of us." "That sounds perfect." "Great. I'll set it up." Another pause. "You sure you're okay? You sound different." "It's been a long day." "Okay. Well, get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow." "Yes," Vincent said quietly. "Tomorrow." He ended the call. The elevator doors opened onto the building's lobby. The night air hit his face as he stepped outside carrying sounds of traffic and voices and distant music. The world was alive in ways he had never imagined, vibrant, complex, impossibly beautiful. And his brother had kept it from him for 23 years. Tomorrow, Anthony would learn what happened to people who betrayed Vincent Castellano. But tonight, Vincent needed to think, to plan, to understand exactly how deep his brother's treachery ran. He pulled out his phone and made one more call. "Grace, this is Vincent Castellano. I need to see you tonight. There's something you need to know about what you uncovered. Mr. Castellano, is everything okay?" "No," Vincent said, watching the city lights blur past his car window. "But it will be, soon." He hung up and settled into the darkness of the back seat, listening to sounds he had been denied his entire life. Somewhere across the city, his brother was preparing for a dinner that would never happen the way he planned. And Vincent Castellano was preparing for a reckoning that had been 23 years in the making. The empire of silence was crumbling, and when it fell, it would bury everyone who had built it. Grace arrived at the mansion 40 minutes after Vincent's call. He watched her from the window of his study as she stepped out of the taxi, her coat pulled tight against the February cold. She moved quickly toward the service entrance, and Vincent found himself listening to sounds he had never noticed before: the crunch of her footsteps on gravel, the distant slam of the taxi door, the whisper of wind through bare trees. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours. Everything except the rage burning in his chest. He met her in the library on the second floor, away from the security cameras that Anthony had helped install 5 years ago. The irony of hiding from his own surveillance system was not lost on Vincent. How many other systems in his life had been designed to keep him controlled rather than protected? Grace entered the library with the cautious steps of a woman who understood she was walking into something dangerous. Her eyes found his, immediately searching for answers to questions she hadn't yet asked. "Close the door," Vincent said. She obeyed, and the soft click of the latch seemed to echo through the room. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Castellano?" Vincent gestured to the chair across from his. "Sit. We need to talk about what you found today." Grace lowered herself into the leather chair, her hands folded in her lap with forced calm. "Did I do something wrong if I overstepped?" "You saved my life." Vincent's voice was quiet but intense. "Or at least you gave me back a life I didn't know had been stolen." "I don't understand." "Neither did I, until about 2 hours ago." Vincent leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "That blockage you removed. It didn't get there by accident. Someone put it there. Someone paid doctors to keep it there for 23 years. Grace's face went pale. "Who would do something like that?" "My brother." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Grace was only beginning to grasp. "Your brother," she repeated. "But I've seen him here. He seems so devoted to you. Always checking on you, always making sure you're okay. Always making sure I need him." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Anthony has been my translator, my interpreter, my connection to the hearing world since I was 14 years old. Every negotiation, every meeting, every conversation I couldn't hear directly, it all went through him. And if you could hear, I wouldn't need him anymore. He'd lose his position in the family, his power, his purpose." Vincent stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "My brother didn't steal my hearing because he hated me, Grace. He stole it because he loved me too much to let me not need him." Grace was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Don't feel sorry for him. Feel sorry for the 23 years I spent thinking I was broken when I was perfectly fine. Feel sorry for the millions of dollars he collected by positioning himself as my voice. Feel sorry for every lie he told while looking me in the eye and pretending to protect me." Vincent turned back to face her. "I need your help, Grace." "My help, Mr. Castellano?" "I'm just a housekeeper. I clean floors and dust shelves. I don't know anything about whatever this is." You know how to see things that others miss. You proved that today. Vincent crossed the room and sat in the chair beside hers. Tomorrow night I'm having dinner with my brother. He thinks it's to discuss business. He thinks everything is normal. He has no idea that I can hear every word he says now. What are you going to do? I'm going to let him talk, let him lie, let him dig his own grave with every word that comes out of his mouth. Vincent's eyes hardened. And then I'm going to confront him with the truth. Grace swallowed hard. That sounds dangerous. It is. Which is why I need someone I can trust in this house. Someone who isn't on Anthony's payroll. Someone who has no loyalty to anyone except the truth. You barely know me. I know you saw something that 100 doctors missed. I know you risked your job to help a man everyone else is afraid of. I know you could have walked away and you didn't. Vincent held her gaze. In my world, that makes you more trustworthy than most people I've known for 20 years. Grace looked down at her hands, processing everything he had told her. When she looked up again, there was a quiet determination in her eyes that Vincent recognized. It was the look of someone who had survived hard things and learned to be strong because of them. What do you need me to do? Vincent allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile. For now, just watch. Listen. Pay attention to who comes and goes, who talks to who seems nervous when they shouldn't be. Anthony has been running his operation inside my house for 2 decades. He has allies here. I need to know who they are. And tomorrow night? Tomorrow night, I need you to be ready. If things go badly, if Anthony tries something desperate, I need someone who can get a message out. Someone he won't suspect. Grace nodded slowly. I can do that. There's one more thing. Vincent hesitated, then continued. Your children. Marcus and Destiny. If Anthony finds out what you know, they could be in danger. Grace's expression shifted instantly. The calm professionalism vanished, replaced by the fierce protectiveness of a mother who had already lost her husband to violence. Don't you threaten my children. I'm not threatening them. I'm warning you. Vincent's voice was gentle but firm. This isn't a game, Grace. My brother has killed people to protect his secrets. If he discovers that you're the reason his 23-year deception just collapsed, he won't hesitate to silence you. And he might use your children to do it. Grace's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. Then we better make sure he doesn't find out. Vincent nodded. I'll have Marco assign protection to your family. Discreetly. They won't even know they're being watched. Can you trust Marco? The question stopped Vincent cold. Could he trust Marco? 24 hours ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. Marco had been his lieutenant for 2 decades. They had survived street wars together, built empires together, buried enemies together. But 24 hours ago, he had trusted his brother too. I don't know anymore, Vincent admitted. I don't know who's loyal to me and who's been working for Anthony this whole time. That's why I need you, Grace. You're the only person in this house who I know for certain hasn't been corrupted. Because I just got here. Because you have no reason to lie to me. No history with my family. No debts to pay off. No secrets to hide. Vincent stood. Go home to your children. Hold them tight. And come back tomorrow ready to help me take down the man who stole half my life. Grace rose from her chair. At the door, she paused and turned back. Mr. Castellano, can I ask you something? Go ahead. When you confront your brother tomorrow, what happens if he doesn't confess? What happens if he lies to your face and you can't prove anything? Vincent's expression grew cold. Then I'll have to find another way to get the truth, and Anthony won't like that way nearly as much. Grace held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded and slipped out of the library. Vincent stood alone in the silence that was no longer silent, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway, listening to the distant murmur of staff preparing the house for night, listening to the heartbeat of an empire that had been built on lies he was only now beginning to uncover. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, he had preparations to make. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in 3 years. The voice that answered was gruff, suspicious, and exactly what Vincent needed. "Tommy, it's Vincent Castellano." Silence on the other end. Then, "Vincent Jesus, it's been a long time. I need a favor." "What kind of favor?" "The kind that involves my brother, and the kind that needs to stay between us." Another pause. "I'm listening." Vincent began to explain, and as he talked, he felt something shifting inside him. For 37 years, he had operated in the dark, navigating a world he could only partially perceive. Now, for the first time, he could see clearly. And what he saw was war. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Vincent hadn't slept. He had spent the night reviewing security footage, financial records, phone logs, anything that might reveal the scope of Anthony's betrayal. What he found made his stomach turn. Payments to Dr. Patterson weren't the only unexplained transactions in the family accounts. There were transfers to specialists in New York, Los Angeles, Houston, every city where Vincent had sought treatment for his deafness. There were payments to staff members who had left the Castellano household over the years, their departures now seeming less like natural turnover and more like silencing. And there were payments to Marco. Small amounts at first, easily disguised as bonuses or expense reimbursements. But over the past 5 years, the payments had grown larger, more frequent, harder to explain. Marco had received nearly $200,000 from accounts that Vincent had never authorized. His lieutenant, his most trusted soldier, his brother's spy. Vincent stared at the evidence on his laptop screen, feeling the foundations of his world crumbling beneath him. Everything he had built, everyone he had trusted, it had all been compromised. Anthony hadn't just stolen his hearing. He had stolen his entire organization from the inside out. The knock on his study door came at precisely 9 o'clock. "Come in." Anthony entered with his usual confident stride, 2 cups of coffee balanced in his hands. "Morning, brother. Brought your favorite black no sugar hot enough to strip paint." He set 1 cup on Vincent's desk with a practiced flourish. "You look like hell. Rough night." Vincent forced himself to remain calm, to keep his expression neutral, even as every cell in his body screamed for him to reach across the desk and wrap his hands around his brother's throat. "Couldn't sleep. Business on my mind." The Bertolini situation. Anthony settled into his usual chair, crossing his legs with casual ease. "I talked to old man Sal yesterday. He's willing to give up his grandson to smooth things over. Kid's going to take a beating, probably lose a few fingers, but the family stays intact. No war." Vincent watched his brother's lips move, but now he was also listening. Hearing the subtle confidence in Anthony's voice, the practiced smoothness of his delivery, the complete absence of guilt or hesitation. 23 years of lies, and Anthony delivered them as easily as breathing. "That's good news," Vincent said carefully. "When do we meet?" "Tonight, if you're up for it." Sal suggested neutral ground, that Italian place on Oak Street, the one with the private rooms. "And you trust him?" Anthony laughed. "Hell no. But I trust his fear of what happens if he crosses us. Sal Bertolini is a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them." Vincent nodded slowly, keeping his face impassive while his mind raced. The dinner with Sal Bertolini would provide perfect cover. Anthony would be relaxed, confident, completely unsuspecting. "Set it up," Vincent said. "But I want to talk to you first, privately, before we meet with Sal." Something flickered in Anthony's eyes there, and gone so fast that Vincent would have missed it before yesterday. But now he caught it. A tiny flash of concern quickly suppressed. "Sure, brother. Whatever you need. What's on your mind?" "Family history. I've been thinking about the past lately, about Dad, about how things were before he died." Anthony's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "That's unexpected. You don't usually like talking about the old days." "Maybe I should start. There's a lot I don't remember. A lot I probably missed because of..." Vincent gestured vaguely toward his ears. "You were there for all of it. You heard everything. I want to know what I missed." The silence stretched between them heavy with unspoken tension. Vincent watched his brother's face, searching for cracks in the mask, listening for changes in his breathing that might betray nervousness. Anthony set down his coffee cup. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Starting with the year Dad died. I was 14. My hearing was getting worse, at least that's what the doctors kept telling me. But you were 18. You were hearing everything that happened in this house. Every conversation, every deal, every secret." "That was a long time ago, Vincent." 23 years. Funny number, isn't it? That's exactly how long Dr. Patterson has been telling me my condition is permanent. Vincent leaned forward. "I saw him yesterday, Anthony. Did I mention that?" The change in Anthony's posture was subtle, but unmistakable. His shoulders tightened, his breathing quickened. His hands, which had been resting casually on the arms of his chair, curled slightly inward. "No, you didn't mention it. Everything okay?" "Fine, just a routine checkup. But Patterson seemed nervous, more nervous than usual." Vincent paused. "Do you know why that might be?" "How would I know what's going on with your doctor?" "You're right. How would you know?" Vincent stood slowly. "Unless you had a reason to talk to him. A reason to make sure he kept telling me the same thing, year after year." Anthony's mask slipped for just a moment. Vincent saw fear flash across his brother's face, raw primal fear of being caught. Then the mask was back smoother than ever. "Brother, I don't know what Patterson told you, but if he's been saying things about me, he's lying. You know how those doctors are. They'll say anything to cover their own." "He told me everything, Anthony." The words dropped like bombs in the quiet room. Anthony went still. Completely perfectly still, like a deer caught in headlights. "What did he tell you?" "About the payments. 50,000 a year for 23 years. About the blockage you had him maintain in my ear canal. About how one simple procedure could have restored my hearing at any time, but you paid him to make sure that never happened." Vincent's voice remained calm, controlled, but each word carried the weight of decades of betrayal. "He's lying," Anthony said quickly. "Whatever he said, it's not true. I would never—" "I can hear you, Anthony." The statement stopped his brother cold. "What?" "I can hear you. Right now. Every word coming out of your mouth." Vincent walked around the desk, moving closer to his brother with each sentence. "Yesterday, a housekeeper noticed something in my ear that your paid doctors conveniently missed for 23 years. She removed it. 30 seconds of work undid everything you've been paying for since I was 14 years old." Anthony's face had gone white. "Vincent, listen to me." "I've been listening, brother. For the first time in my life, I've been listening. And do you know what I hear?" Vincent stopped directly in front of Anthony's chair, looking down at the man who had stolen his world. "I hear lies. The same lies you've been feeding me since Dad died. The same lies you've been using to control every conversation, every deal, every relationship in my life. I did it to protect you. You did it to control me." "No." Anthony stood, desperation creeping into his voice. "You don't understand. When Dad died, the whole organization was ready to tear itself apart. You were just a kid, a deaf kid that nobody thought could run anything. They were going to eat you alive, Vincent. The other families, our own people, they all saw you as weak. So you made sure I stayed weak. I made sure you stayed alive." Anthony's voice rose, cracking with emotion. "I made myself indispensable. I made them need me so they wouldn't move against you. Every translation, every negotiation, every deal I brokered, it was all to keep you safe, to keep the family safe. By stealing my hearing. By making sure you needed me, because as long as you needed me, no one could touch you without going through me first." Anthony's eyes were wet now. "I know it was wrong. I know I should have told you years ago, but I couldn't. By the time I realized how far it had gone, there was no way back. The lies were too deep. The money was too much. And I was too afraid of losing you." Vincent stared at his brother, hearing the pain in his voice, seeing the tears streaming down his face. Part of him, a small, stubborn part, that still remembered the brother who had taught him to ride a bike, who had protected him from bullies, who had held him when their mother died, wanted to believe it. But another part, the part that had spent 37 years in silence, knew better. "How much?" Vincent asked quietly. "What? How much money did you make by being my voice? How much did you skim from deals I couldn't hear? How much did you steal from the family while pretending to protect me?" Anthony's expression shifted. The tears stopped. The mask came back harder than before. "I took what I deserved, what I earned by keeping this family alive while you sat in your office reading lips and pretending to be in charge." "There it is." Vincent nodded slowly. "The truth. Finally. You want truth? Fine. Here's truth." Anthony's voice turned bitter. "I've been running this organization for 20 years. Every alliance, every expansion, every dollar we've made, that was me. You were just a figurehead, a deaf puppet sitting on a throne while I pulled the strings. And Marco, is he yours too?" Anthony laughed a sharp, ugly sound. "Marco's been on my payroll for 5 years. Half the guards in this house report to me. The accountants, the lawyers, the doctors, all mine. You've been living in a kingdom of my creation, brother, and you never even knew it." Vincent absorbed this information with a calm that surprised even himself. "Thank you, Anthony." "For what?" "For finally being honest with me." Vincent reached into his jacket. "I recorded everything." Anthony's face went pale again. "You what?" "This conversation, your confession, all of it." Vincent held up his phone. "The family captains are going to find this very interesting. They'll never believe you. They work for me." "Some of them do, but not all." Vincent smiled coldly. "Did you really think I wouldn't have contingencies, brother? Did you really think that in 37 years of running this organization, I wouldn't have built relationships that didn't go through you?" Anthony's composure crumbled completely. "Vincent, please, we can work this out. We're brothers. Blood. That has to mean something." "It meant everything to me. Once." Vincent walked to the door and opened it. 2 men stood in the hallway. Men Anthony didn't recognize. Men who had been loyal to Vincent since before Anthony's betrayal began. "Take him to the basement. Make him comfortable. He's going to be there for a while." "Vincent, don't do this. Please. I'm your brother. I'm your blood." "You were my brother," Vincent said, quietly watching as the men took Anthony by the arms. "Now you're just another man who betrayed me, and you know what happens to men who betray me." Anthony struggled against his captors, his screams echoing through the hallway as they dragged him toward the basement stairs. Vincent stood in the doorway of his study, listening to his brother's voice grow fainter, listening to the sounds of struggle and desperation, listening to the end of everything he had believed about family and loyalty and trust. When the house finally fell silent, he pulled out his phone and dialed Grace's number. "It's done," he said when she answered. "Anthony's been dealt with, but this isn't over." "What do you mean?" "My brother built a network inside my own organization. People who are loyal to him, not me. I need to find out who they are before they realize what's happened and try to finish what Anthony started." "How can I help?" Vincent paused, surprised by her immediate willingness. "You've already helped more than you know." "That's not what I asked. How can I help now?" He considered the question carefully. Grace Williams had stumbled into the middle of a war she hadn't asked for. She had children to protect, a life to rebuild, every reason to walk away and pretend none of this had ever happened. But she wasn't walking away. "Meet me at the house in 1 hour," Vincent said finally. "We have work to do." He hung up and stood alone in the silence of his study, surrounded by the echoes of his brother's confession. The empire of lies was crumbling, and Vincent Castellano was only getting started. Grace arrived at the mansion exactly 1 hour later, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination that she hadn't felt since the night her husband died. The guards at the gate waved her through without question. Vincent had called ahead. She was expected now, not just another invisible housekeeper moving through the shadows of powerful men. She found Vincent in the library, standing by the window with his back to the door. He didn't turn when she entered, but she noticed his head tilt slightly, listening to her footsteps, still marveling at the simple miracle of sound. "You came," he said. "You asked me to." Vincent turned to face her. The man she saw was different from the one she had met just days ago. There was something raw in his eyes now, something wounded that his cold exterior couldn't quite hide. "My brother is in the basement," he said flatly. "He confessed to everything. 23 years of stealing my hearing, my organization, my life." Grace felt her stomach tighten. "What are you going to do with him?" "I haven't decided yet. Part of me wants to kill him. Part of me wants to let him rot in that basement until he understands what it feels like to be trapped in silence." Vincent's jaw clenched. "And part of me, a very small part, still remembers that he's the only family I have left." "That small part matters, Mr. Castellano." "Does it?" Vincent's voice was bitter. "He looked me in the eye for 23 years and lied. Every single day, every conversation, every moment we shared. All of it was built on his betrayal. And he's still your brother. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. I learned that today." Grace was quiet for a moment, choosing her next words carefully. "When my husband was dying, he told me something I've never forgotten. He said that the people who hurt us the most are always the ones we love the most, because they're the only ones we let close enough to reach our hearts." Vincent stared at her. "Your husband sounds like a wise man." He was, and he was also flawed. He made mistakes. He hurt me sometimes without meaning to. Grace met Vincent's gaze steadily. "But I forgave him because I understood that loving someone means accepting that they're human, that they'll fail you, that they'll disappoint you, and that forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of carrying that pain." "You think I should forgive Anthony?" "I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. But I also think that killing your brother won't give you back those 23 years. It'll just add more blood to hands that are already stained." Vincent turned back to the window. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of impossible choices. Finally, he spoke. "Marco is on his way here. I'm going to confront him about the payments from Anthony." "Is that safe?" "Probably not, but I need to know how deep this goes. I need to know who I can trust and who needs to be eliminated." "Eliminated." Grace repeated the word carefully. "You mean killed." "This is my world, Grace. It's ugly and violent and unforgiving. I didn't choose it, but I've survived in it for 37 years. And the only way to survive is to cut out the cancer before it spreads." "And if Marco denies everything," Vincent's expression hardened, "then I'll know he's lying, because I can hear now. I can hear the tremor in a man's voice when he's afraid. I can hear the hesitation when someone is constructing a lie. I can hear truth and deception in ways I never could before." He turned to face her again. "That's why I need you here. You see things others miss. Together we might be able to separate the loyal from the traitors before it's too late." Grace nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" "Watch. Listen. Tell me if you notice anything I miss." Vincent glanced at his phone. "Marco will be here in 10 minutes. Stay in the room, but stay quiet. Let me do the talking." "Okay." "And Grace, if things go badly, if Marco tries something, there's a door behind the bookshelf that leads to a service corridor. It'll take you out to the garden. Don't hesitate, just run." Grace felt a chill run down her spine. "You think it might come to that?" "I don't know what to think anymore. Everyone I trusted has betrayed me. Why should Marco be any different?" Before Grace could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Heavy, confident footsteps that slowed as they approached the library door. Marco appeared in the doorway, his face carefully neutral. "Boss, you wanted to see me. Come in. Close the door." Marco obeyed, his eyes flickering briefly to Grace before returning to Vincent. "What's she doing here?" "She stays. Sit down, Marco." The lieutenant hesitated for just a moment, a hesitation that Vincent caught with his newly awakened hearing. Then he crossed to the chair Vincent indicated and lowered himself into it with forced casualness. "What's going on, boss? You seem tense." "I've had a difficult 24 hours. Vincent remained standing, positioning himself between Marco and the door. "My brother is in the basement. Did you know that—" Marco's face showed surprise, but Vincent heard the slight catch in his breathing that suggested the surprise wasn't entirely genuine. "Anthony, what's he doing in the basement?" "Paying for 23 years of betrayal." Vincent watched Marco's reaction carefully. "He confessed to stealing my hearing, Marco. Paying doctors to keep me deaf. Building a shadow organization inside my own family while I sat in my office reading lips like a fool." "Jesus." Marco shook his head slowly. "I had no idea, boss. I swear." "Really?" "Because I found some interesting transactions in the family accounts. Payments that went to you. Nearly $200,000 over the past 5 years. Marco's face went pale. "Those were bonuses, expense reimbursements. Anthony said you approved them." "I never approved anything of the kind." "Then Anthony lied to me too." Marco leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Boss, you have to believe me. I've been loyal to you for 20 years. Whatever Anthony told you, whatever he did, I wasn't part of it. I'm your man. Always have been." Vincent studied his lieutenant's face, listening to every word, every breath, every subtle variation in tone that might reveal deception. Marco sounded sincere, but so had Anthony. "Tell me about the Bertolini situation," Vincent said, changing direction abruptly. "The real situation, not the version Anthony fed me." Marco blinked at the sudden shift. "What do you mean?" "I mean that my brother has been filtering every piece of information that reached me for 2 decades. So I want to hear it from you directly. What really happened with the Bertolini warehouses?" Marco was silent for a moment, and Vincent could hear his mind racing, calculating, trying to figure out what answer Vincent wanted. "The truth, Marco, not what you think I want to hear." "The truth is complicated, boss." "Uncomplicate it." Marco took a deep breath. "The Bertolini kid didn't go rogue. Old man Sal authorized the hit. He's been testing your defenses for months, looking for weaknesses. Anthony told me to keep it quiet, said he was handling it through back channels." Vincent felt his blood run cold. "Anthony told you to keep it from me." "He said he didn't want to worry you. Said he had it under control." "And you listened to him, instead of coming to me directly?" Marco's eyes dropped to the floor. "He's your brother, boss. He said he was protecting you. I believed him. So you took his money and followed his orders. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Marco?" Vincent's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Explain to me how my most trusted lieutenant ended up on my brother's payroll without my knowledge. Explain how you looked me in the eye for 5 years while secretly reporting to someone else." Marco was sweating now, his composure crumbling under Vincent's relentless pressure. "I thought I was helping you, boss. Anthony said the payments were from family funds, that you knew about them but couldn't acknowledge them openly for tax reasons. He said a lot of things, and you believed all of it without ever asking me directly." "You're right." Marco's voice cracked. "I should have come to you. I should have questioned what Anthony was telling me. But he was your brother, your blood. I never imagined he would betray you like this." Vincent stared at his lieutenant for a long moment, weighing his words, listening for the subtle signs of deception that his new hearing could detect. Marco was afraid. That much was clear from his rapid breathing, his elevated heart rate, the slight tremor in his voice. But was he lying, Grace? Vincent spoke without taking his eyes off Marco. "What do you think?" Grace had been watching the exchange in silence, her keen eyes taking in every detail of Marco's body language, every flicker of expression across his face. "I think he's telling the truth about not knowing the full extent of Anthony's betrayal," she said carefully. "But I also think he's not telling you everything." Marco's head snapped toward her. "Who the hell are you to judge me?" She's the woman who restored my hearing when your paid doctors couldn't be bothered to try. Vincent's voice was ice. And she's the only person in this room I actually trust right now, so I'd suggest you answer her observation with something more useful than anger. Marco's face contorted with conflicting emotions: resentment, fear, desperation, and something else. Something that looked almost like relief. There's more, he admitted finally. Things I didn't want to tell you because I was afraid of what you'd do. Tell me now. Anthony has people outside the organization, contacts in other families. He's been building alliances behind your back for years, promising them pieces of your territory in exchange for support. Vincent felt the floor shift beneath him. Which families? The Bertolinis for sure. Probably the Morettis. Maybe others I don't know about. Marco looked up, meeting Vincent's eyes with an expression of genuine remorse. I only found out about it 6 months ago, boss. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you without starting a war. And you decided the best approach was to say nothing while my brother sold off my empire piece by piece. I was scared. Marco's voice was barely above a whisper. Anthony has people everywhere. Guards, accountants, even some of the family captains. I didn't know who I could trust. I didn't know if telling you would get me killed. Vincent processed this information with a cold fury that threatened to overwhelm his reason. His brother hadn't just stolen his hearing. He had been systematically dismantling everything Vincent had built, selling it off to rival families, while Vincent sat in his office believing he was still in control. Who else knows about this? Vincent demanded. I don't know for sure. Maybe Tommy Rizzoli. He's been acting strange lately, avoiding Anthony whenever possible. And there's a new accountant, Stephanie Chen. She started asking questions about some of the financial irregularities last month. Anthony had her transferred to our Florida operation right after. Because she was getting too close to the truth. That's my guess. Vincent turned to Grace. I need you to find Stephanie Chen. She might have evidence we can use. How am I supposed to find an accountant in Florida? I'll give you the resources. Money, contacts, whatever you need. But it has to be you. You're the only person Anthony's network doesn't know about. Grace felt the weight of his request settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. Mr. Castellano, I have children. I can't just fly to Florida on some kind of spy mission. Your children will be protected. I'll have them moved to a safe house with round-the-clock security. Nothing will happen to them while you're gone. And if something happens to me... Vincent's expression softened for just a moment. Then I'll personally make sure Marcus and Destiny are taken care of for the rest of their lives. College funds, housing, whatever they need. You have my word. Grace looked at this man who had been a stranger just days ago. This crime boss who had terrorized Chicago for decades. This deaf man who had just discovered that everything he believed about his life was a lie. And she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Desperation. Not the desperation of a man losing power or money or influence. The desperation of a man who had just realized he was utterly, completely alone. I'll do it, she heard herself say. But I want one thing in return. Name it. When this is over, when you've dealt with Anthony and cleaned out his network, I want you to help me. My husband's murder was never solved. The police said it was a random robbery, but I've never believed that. Vincent studied her face. You think someone targeted him specifically? He was a witness in a federal case, corporate fraud. He was supposed to testify 2 weeks after he died. Grace's voice trembled with old grief and new determination. The case fell apart without him. The defendants walked free. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't trust you before. Now I do. Grace met his gaze steadily. Help me find out who killed my husband, and I'll help you save your empire. Vincent nodded slowly. Deal. Marco cleared his throat awkwardly. Boss, what about me? Vincent turned back to his lieutenant, considering the man who had served him for 20 years, who had taken money from his brother without question, who had kept secrets that could have brought down the entire organization. You're going to prove your loyalty, Vincent said finally. Starting now. I want the names of everyone Anthony has been paying. Every guard, every captain, every accountant. I want to know who's loyal to me and who needs to be dealt with. That's going to take time. Anthony was careful. You have 48 hours. After that, I'm going to assume that anyone you haven't cleared is working against me, and I'm going to treat them accordingly. Marco swallowed hard. Understood, boss. One more thing. Vincent leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. If I find out you've been holding anything back, if there's even one piece of information you didn't share, what happens to my brother in that basement will seem merciful compared to what I'll do to you. I understand. Good. Now get out of my sight and start making a list. Marco rose quickly, his legs unsteady beneath him. At the door, he paused and looked back. For what it's worth, boss, I'm sorry. I should have been better. I should have seen what Anthony was doing and stopped it. Yes, Vincent said coldly, you should have. Marco left, and the library fell silent. Grace stood by the window processing everything she had just witnessed. The threats, the manipulation, the casual references to violence that seemed as natural to these men as breathing. This was the world she had stepped into. This was the darkness that had consumed her life in the span of a few short days. Having second thoughts, Vincent asked, reading her expression. No, I'm just adjusting. You're stronger than you know, Grace. Stronger than most people who've worked for me for decades. Vincent moved to stand beside her at the window. When I first saw you, I thought you were just another housekeeper. Invisible. Forgettable. Another face that would pass through my life without leaving a mark. And now I think you might be the only thing standing between me and complete destruction. Vincent turned to look at her. You gave me back my hearing. You showed me the truth about my brother. You're willing to risk your life to help me clean up a mess you didn't create. I'm not doing it just for you, Grace admitted. I'm doing it because someone needs to stand up against people who think they can destroy lives without consequences. Your brother stole your hearing, but the people who killed my husband stole my children's father. Somewhere out there, men are living free because they thought they could silence anyone who got in their way. And you want justice. I want them to know that some silences can't be bought, some truths can't be buried. Some people refuse to stay quiet no matter how hard you push them down. Vincent nodded slowly. Then we have the same goal, just different targets. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. What is it? Grace asked. A text from a number I don't recognize. Vincent read the message aloud. Your brother sends his regards. The basement isn't as secure as you think. Grace's blood ran cold. What does that mean? Vincent was already moving toward the door, pulling his gun from inside his jacket. It means Anthony's people are making their move. The sound of gunfire erupted from somewhere below them, followed by shouts and the thunder of running footsteps. Vincent grabbed Grace's arm. The passage behind the bookshelf. Go now. What about you? I'm going to finish what my brother started. He pressed a phone into her hand. If I don't call you in 2 hours, contact Tommy Rizzoli. He'll know what to do. Vincent. Go. Grace ran for the bookshelf, her hands shaking as she searched for the hidden mechanism. Behind her, she heard Vincent's footsteps, heading toward the gunfire, heading toward the violence that had defined his entire life. The panel swung open, revealing a dark passage that smelled of dust and secrets. Grace plunged into the darkness, her heart pounding with fear, her mind racing with the knowledge that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The war for the Castellano Empire had begun. And Grace Williams was no longer invisible. The passage was narrow and dark, but Grace pushed forward without hesitation. Behind her, the sounds of gunfire grew louder, closer, more desperate. She could hear men shouting, furniture crashing, the unmistakable thunder of bodies hitting the floor. Vincent was fighting for his life, and she was running away. The thought made her sick, but she forced herself to keep moving. Vincent had given her a mission. He had trusted her with something more important than staying to fight. He had trusted her with the truth. The passage opened into a small garden behind the mansion. Grace emerged into cold February air, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could see guards running toward the main house, their weapons drawn, their faces tight with confusion and fear. Nobody noticed her. She was invisible again, just another shadow moving through the chaos. Grace ran toward the service gate, the phone Vincent had given her clutched in her trembling hand. Her mind raced through everything she had learned in the past 48 hours. Anthony's betrayal, Marco's complicity, the network of corruption that had stolen Vincent's hearing and threatened to destroy his empire. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a thread that connected to her husband's murder. She didn't believe in coincidences. Daniel Williams had been killed 2 weeks before he was supposed to testify in a federal case. Now she was caught up in another web of lies and violence, another conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of power. What if they were connected? The thought hit her like a physical blow, stopping her in her tracks just inside the service gate. What if Anthony's network extended beyond the Castellano family? What if the same people who had kept Vincent deaf for 23 years were the same people who had silenced her husband permanently? Grace's hands shook as she dialed Tommy Rizzoli's number. The phone rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Who is this?" "My name is Grace Williams. Vincent Castellano gave me this number. He said to call you if something went wrong." Silence on the other end. Then, "What happened?" "There's an attack on the mansion. Gunfire everywhere. Vincent told me to run. Told me to contact you if he didn't call in 2 hours." "Where are you now?" "Outside the service gate. I don't know where to go." "Stay where you are. I'm sending someone to pick you up." Tommy's voice was calm, controlled the voice of a man who had dealt with crisis before. "Don't talk to anyone. Don't trust anyone. The only people you can rely on right now are me and whoever Vincent personally vouched for." "What about Marco?" Another pause. "Marco's loyalty is complicated. Stay away from him until we know more." Vincent already confronted him. Marco said he didn't know the full extent of Anthony's betrayal. "And you believed him?" Grace thought about the fear in Marco's eyes, the tremor in his voice, the way he had crumbled under Vincent's questioning. "I think he was telling the truth about some things, but not everything." "Smart woman." Tommy's voice carried a hint of approval. "A car will be there in 10 minutes. Black SUV license plate starting with X7. Get in and don't ask questions. I'll explain everything when you're safe." The line went dead. Grace pressed her back against the cold stone of the gate, trying to slow her racing heart. Inside the mansion, the gunfire had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow more terrifying than the violence. Was Vincent alive? Was Anthony? The questions circled in her mind like vultures waiting for something to die. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Grace watched the street, jumping at every sound, every shadow, every movement that might signal danger. Her children's faces flashed through her mind. Marcus with his father's smile, Destiny with her mother's stubborn determination. She had promised them she would come home. She intended to keep that promise. The black SUV appeared exactly when Tommy had said it would. Grace checked the license plate twice before approaching, her survival instincts screaming at her to be careful, to trust no one, to assume that everyone was a potential enemy. The driver was a woman, mid-40s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense expression. Grace Williams. "Yes. Get in. Tommy's waiting." Grace climbed into the back seat, and the SUV pulled away from the mansion, just as sirens began wailing in the distance. Through the rear window, she could see the first police cars arriving, their lights painting the night in red and blue. Whatever had happened inside that house, it was over now, one way or another. The drive took 20 minutes. Grace spent most of it staring out the window, watching the familiar streets of Chicago blur past, trying to process everything that had happened since she had pulled that tiny piece of wax from Vincent Castellano's ear. 3 days ago, she had been a housekeeper. Invisible. Forgettable. Just another working mother trying to survive in a city that didn't care whether she lived or died. Now she was caught in the middle of a mob war, carrying secrets that could bring down one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. Life had a twisted sense of humor. The SUV stopped in front of a warehouse near the waterfront. The driver led Grace through a series of doors and hallways until they reached a room filled with monitors, computers, and men who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Tommy Rizzoli stood in the center of it all, a heavy-set man in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much violence to be surprised by anything anymore. Mrs. Williams. He extended his hand. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Is Vincent alive? Tommy's expression flickered with something that might have been admiration. You care about him. I care about finishing what we started. Is he alive or not? He's alive, wounded, but alive. His people managed to hold off Anthony's attack long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Tommy gestured for Grace to sit. The situation is contained for now, but it's far from over. What happened? Anthony's loyalists made their move. They knew Vincent was going to come after them, so they struck first. Tried to free Anthony from the basement and eliminate Vincent in the process. Did they succeed in freeing Anthony, I mean? Tommy's jaw tightened. Yes, Anthony escaped during the chaos. We don't know where he is now. Grace felt her stomach drop. So he's still out there, still dangerous. More dangerous than ever. He's got nothing left to lose now. His cover is blown, his network is exposed, and his brother wants him dead. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. What does Vincent want me to do? He wants you to continue with the original plan. Find Stephanie Chen in Florida. Get the evidence she has on Anthony's financial dealings. Bring it back so we can use it to turn Anthony's remaining allies against him. And my children, already being moved to a safe house. I have my best people protecting them. Tommy met her eyes directly. I know this isn't what you signed up for, Mrs. Williams. You came to that mansion looking for a job, not a war. If you want to walk away, I can arrange for you and your children to disappear. New identities, new city, new life. Vincent would understand. Grace considered the offer. It was tempting, more tempting than she wanted to admit. She could take her children and leave this world of violence and betrayal behind, start over somewhere safe. But then she thought about Daniel. Her husband had been killed because he refused to stay silent. He had seen something wrong, and he had chosen to speak up even knowing the risks, even knowing that powerful people wanted him dead. She couldn't dishonor his memory by running away now. I'm not walking away, Grace said firmly. I made a deal with Vincent. I intend to keep it. Tommy studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're either very brave or very foolish, Mrs. Williams. Probably both. Fair enough. Tommy handed her a folder. Everything you need is in here. Flight information, hotel reservations, contact details for our people in Florida. Stephanie Chen is working at a small accounting firm in Miami. She doesn't know you're coming, so you'll need to approach her carefully. What should I tell her? The truth. That Vincent Castellano needs her help to take down the man who tried to have her killed. Grace opened the folder and began reviewing the documents. Flight leaving in 4 hours. Hotel, near Stephanie's workplace. Emergency contacts in case things went wrong. One more thing, Tommy said. Vincent asked me to give you this. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, an old picture of 2 men standing together, their arms around each other's shoulders, their smiles bright with the easy affection of brothers who loved each other. Vincent and Anthony, maybe 20 years ago. On the back, Vincent had written a single sentence, "Remember who we were before the lies." Grace stared at the photograph, feeling the weight of it in her hands. He still loves him, she said quietly. Of course he does. That's what makes this so hard. Tommy's voice was heavy with something that sounded almost like grief. Vincent and Anthony were inseparable as kids. When their father was killed, Anthony stepped up, took care of Vincent, protected him, helped him build the organization into what it is today. And then he betrayed him. The worst betrayals always come from the people we trust most. That's what makes them betrayals. Grace tucked the photograph into her pocket. I'll bring back the evidence. And when I do, Vincent is going to have to make a choice about what to do with his brother. What kind of choice? Whether to be the man in this photograph or the man his brother's betrayal has turned him into. Tommy was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled a small, sad smile that transformed his weathered face. Vincent was right about you, Mrs. Williams. You see things other people miss. It's the only skill I have. It's the most important one. Tommy walked her toward the door. The car will take you to the airport. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and remember in this world the people who survive are the ones who see danger before it sees them. Grace nodded and followed the driver back to the SUV. As they pulled away from the warehouse, she took out the photograph again and studied the two brothers, young hopeful, unaware of the darkness that would eventually tear them apart. Vincent had asked her to remember who they were before the lies. But Grace was beginning to understand something important. The lies hadn't created the darkness between the brothers. They had only revealed what was already there, the jealousy, the resentment, the desperate need for control that had been festering in Anthony's heart long before he made his first payment to Dr. Patterson. Some betrayals were born in a moment of weakness. Others were cultivated over a lifetime. The flight to Miami left at 2:00 a.m. Grace spent most of the journey staring out the window at the darkness below, thinking about everything she had learned and everything she still needed to discover. Stephanie Chen was the key. The accountant had seen something in the Castellano financial records that had made Anthony nervous enough to have her transferred across the country. Whatever she knew, it was important enough to kill for, which meant Grace needed to reach her before Anthony's people did. The plane landed just after 5:00 a.m. Grace collected her small bag and made her way through the nearly empty airport. Her exhaustion temporarily pushed aside by adrenaline and determination. A rental car was waiting for her, arranged by Tommy's people. Grace plugged Stephanie Chen's workplace address into her phone and began the drive through Miami's early morning streets. The accounting firm was located in a modest office building near downtown. Grace parked across the street and waited, watching the entrance, trying to plan her approach. She couldn't just walk in and announce that she was there on behalf of a Chicago crime boss. Stephanie would probably call the police, or worse, call Anthony's people to warn them that someone was asking questions. No, Grace needed to be subtle. She needed to find a way to earn Stephanie's trust before revealing why she was really there. At 8:47 a.m., a young Asian woman emerged from a nearby coffee shop, her arms full of files and a paper cup balanced precariously in her hand. She was heading toward the office building, her steps quick and purposeful. Stephanie Chen. Grace recognized her from the photograph in Tommy's folder. Late 20s, sharp features, the kind of focused intensity that suggested someone who paid attention to details. The kind of person who would notice when financial records didn't add up. Grace got out of her car and walked toward the building, timing her approach to intersect with Stephanie's path. "Excuse me," Grace called out. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm looking for the Morrison building. I have a job interview and I think I'm lost." Stephanie stopped, her expression shifting from annoyance to helpfulness. "Morrison building. That's 3 blocks east." She pointed with her coffee cup. "Just follow this street until you hit the big glass tower. Can't miss it." "Thank you so much." Grace hesitated, then added, "I'm actually interviewing for an accounting position. I used to work for a family up in Chicago before I moved down here, the Castellanos. Maybe you've heard of them." The effect was immediate. Stephanie's face went pale. Her coffee cup slipped from her fingers and crashed to the sidewalk, sending hot liquid splashing across the concrete. "Who are you?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "My name is Grace Williams, and I think we need to talk about what you found in those financial records." Stephanie glanced around frantically, as if expecting armed men to materialize from the shadows. "Not here. Not in public." She grabbed Grace's arm and pulled her toward a side alley. "Do you have any idea what you've just done if anyone saw us talking?" Then we should probably find somewhere private, fast. Stephanie stared at her for a long moment, her chest heaving with rapid breaths. There's a park 2 blocks from here. Meet me there in 15 minutes. If I see anyone following you, anyone at all, I'm gone. And you'll never find me again. She turned and walked quickly toward the office building, her spilled coffee forgotten on the sidewalk. Grace watched her go, her heart pounding with the knowledge that she had just taken the first step into something much bigger than she had imagined. Stephanie Chen was scared, terrified actually, which meant whatever she knew about Anthony's operation was even more dangerous than Vincent had suspected. 15 minutes later, Grace found Stephanie sitting on a bench near a small fountain, her eyes scanning every person who passed by. "Sit down," Stephanie said without looking at her, "and keep your voice low." Grace obeyed. "Thank you for meeting me. I haven't decided if I'm going to help you yet. First, you're going to tell me exactly who you are and why you're here." Grace told her everything. Vincent's deafness, Anthony's betrayal, the attack on the mansion, the need for evidence that could turn Anthony's remaining allies against him. When she finished, Stephanie was silent for a long time. "I knew something was wrong," she finally said. "The financial records didn't make sense. Money was moving through accounts that shouldn't exist, going to people who shouldn't have access to Castellano funds. When I started asking questions, Anthony called me into his office." "What did he say?" "He smiled at me. This cold, empty smile that made my skin crawl. And he said, 'Stephanie, you're very good at your job. Too good, maybe. I think your talents would be better utilized in our Florida operation.'" Her voice trembled. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. Transfer to Florida or disappear completely. "So you came here?" "I came here and I kept digging, quietly, carefully, building a file of everything I found. Every suspicious transaction, every hidden account, every payment that led back to Anthony's shadow network." Grace felt her pulse quicken. "You have documentation." "I have everything." Stephanie met her eyes directly. Bank records, wire transfers, emails between Anthony and the families he was negotiating with behind Vincent's back. Enough evidence to put him away for the rest of his life or get him killed by his own people when they realize how badly he's betrayed them. "I need that evidence." "I know. But first you need to understand something." Stephanie leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Anthony isn't working alone. He has a partner. Someone outside the Castellano organization who's been helping him plan this takeover for years." Grace felt the blood drain from her face. "Who?" "I don't have a name. Just references in the financial records to someone called the Architect. Whoever it is, they've been financing Anthony's operation, connecting him with the other families, helping him build the network that almost succeeded in destroying Vincent." "The Architect," Grace repeated. "Any idea who it might be?" "No, but I know where to start looking." Stephanie reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive. "Everything I have is on here. Bank records, communications, transaction histories. Somewhere in all that data is a trail that leads to the Architect." Grace took the drive, feeling its weight in her palm like a loaded weapon. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "You could have run, could have taken this evidence and used it to protect yourself." Stephanie's expression hardened. "Because Anthony Castellano had my sister killed." The words hung in the air between them. "Your sister?" "She worked for the Castellano family 5 years ago, secretary in the accounting department. She started noticing the same things I noticed: money going to places it shouldn't, payments that didn't make sense. She made the mistake of asking questions out loud." "What happened to her?" "Hit and run. Driver was never found. Police ruled it an accident." Stephanie's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But I know the truth. Anthony killed her because she got too close to his secrets. Just like he tried to kill me when I started following the same trail." Grace thought about her own husband killed 2 weeks before he was supposed to testify. Another convenient accident, another inconvenient witness silenced permanently. "I think Anthony, or whoever he's working with, might have killed my husband too," Grace said quietly. Stephanie looked at her with new understanding. Then we both have reasons to want him destroyed. Yes, we do. The two women sat in silence for a moment, bound together by loss and grief and the burning need for justice. Take the evidence to Vincent, Stephanie finally said. Tell him everything I told you. And tell him that when he finds the architect, I want to be there. I want to look into the eyes of the person who ordered my sister's death. I will. Grace stood tucking the USB drive safely into her pocket. Be careful, Mrs. Williams. Anthony has people everywhere. If he finds out you have that drive, he'll kill you without hesitation. I know. And one more thing. Stephanie's voice stopped her. The evidence on that drive, it doesn't just implicate Anthony. It implicates people at the highest levels of Chicago's power structure. Politicians, judges, business leaders. If you expose this, you're not just taking down one man. You're taking down an entire system. Grace looked back at the young accountant, seeing in her eyes the same fire that burned in her own heart. Good, she said. It's time someone did. She walked away from the park, the USB drive pressing against her hip like a promise. The evidence was in her hands. Now she just had to get it back to Vincent before Anthony's people caught up with her. And somewhere in Chicago, a wounded crime boss was waiting for the weapon that would help him destroy his brother. The endgame was approaching, and Grace Williams was carrying the key. The flight back to Chicago felt endless. Grace sat in her window seat, the USB drive hidden inside her bra where no one would think to look. Every face that passed her in the aisle seemed like a potential threat. Every announcement over the intercom made her heart skip. Anthony's people could be anywhere watching, waiting for the moment to strike. But she made it. Tommy's car was waiting at O'Hare, the same driver who had taken her to the warehouse 2 days ago. The woman's expression was grim as Grace climbed into the back seat. Things have gotten worse, she said without preamble. Anthony made contact with the Bertolini and Moretti families. He's offering them pieces of Vincent's territory in exchange for support. How much support? Enough to start a war. Vincent's people are holding but barely. Half his captains have gone dark, either hiding or switching sides. Grace clutched the USB drive through her shirt. This might change things. Stephanie Chen had everything. Financial records, communications, proof of Anthony's betrayal going back years. The driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Then we need to get you to Vincent, fast. They drove through Chicago's streets at dangerous speed, weaving through traffic with the practiced skill of someone who had done this many times before. Grace watched the city blur past, thinking about everything that had happened since she had walked into the Castellano mansion, looking for nothing more than a paycheck. 3 days. In 3 days, her entire life had been transformed. The safe house was located in an industrial area on the south side, Grace's old neighborhood, though she barely recognized it anymore. Armed men stood at every entrance, their eyes scanning for threats, their weapons ready. Tommy met her at the door. You have it. Grace pulled out the USB drive. Everything Stephanie found. But there's more. Anthony has a partner. Someone she called the architect. We need to find out who it is. Tommy's expression darkened. The architect. I've heard that name before. Whispers mostly. Someone who's been moving pieces around Chicago's underworld for years, playing the families against each other. Stephanie thinks this person helped Anthony plan everything. The stolen hearing, the shadow network, all of it. Then we need to find them before they find us. Tommy led her through a series of corridors into a room where Vincent sat behind a makeshift desk. His right arm bandaged his face, pale but determined. He looked up when she entered, and Grace saw something shift in his eyes, relief, gratitude, and something deeper that she couldn't quite name. You made it, he said. I made it. She handed him the USB drive. Stephanie Chen sends her regards, and her evidence. Vincent took the drive, turning it over in his fingers like a precious stone. What did she tell you? Everything. Anthony's financial dealings, his connections to the other families, his plans to take over your organization. Grace paused. And something else. A partner. Someone called the architect who's been helping him from the beginning. Vincent's jaw tightened. I've suspected for a long time that Anthony wasn't working alone. He's smart, but not smart enough to build something this elaborate by himself. Do you have any idea who it might be? I have theories. Vincent stood slowly, wincing at the pain in his wounded arm. But first, I need to deal with my brother. He's been reaching out to allies trying to build support for a final assault. If I don't stop him soon, everything I've built will be destroyed. How are you going to stop him? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of impossible choices. I'm going to give him what he's always wanted. A chance to face me directly. Brother to brother, once and for all. Grace felt a chill run down her spine. You're going to meet with him. I'm going to end this. One way or another. Vincent, that's suicide. He's got allies, weapons people who want you dead. And I have something he doesn't. Vincent met her eyes. The truth. Every captain in my organization, every ally who's been sitting on the fence, every person who's wondering whether to support me or Anthony, they're going to hear exactly what my brother has done. The stolen hearing. The shadow deals, the betrayals, all of it. You're going to expose him publicly. I'm going to give him a choice. Confess and face judgment from the family, or deny everything and watch as the evidence destroys him piece by piece. Vincent's expression hardened. Anthony built his power on lies. I'm going to tear it down with truth. The meeting was arranged for midnight. Vincent chose neutral ground, an abandoned warehouse near the docks that had once belonged to their father. It was fitting somehow. The place where the Castellano Empire had begun would be the place where one of the brothers met his end. Grace insisted on coming. You're not a soldier, Vincent told her. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment I pulled that blockage from your ear. Grace's voice was steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. I started this. I'm going to see it finished. Vincent studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Stay close to Tommy. If things go badly, he'll get you out. And what about you? I'll do what I have to do. The warehouse was cold and dark when they arrived. Vincent's people had secured the perimeter, but everyone knew that Anthony would be bringing his own army. The balance of power would be decided by words before it was decided by bullets. At least that was the plan. Anthony arrived at exactly midnight, flanked by a dozen armed men. He walked with the confident stride of someone who believed he still had the upper hand, his expensive suit somehow immaculate despite the chaos of the past few days. Brother, his voice echoed through the empty space. You wanted to talk. So talk. Vincent stepped forward alone, his bandaged arm visible beneath his jacket. I'm not here to talk, Anthony. I'm here to give you a choice. What kind of choice? Confess. Right now in front of everyone. Tell them what you did, the doctors you paid the hearing, you stole the empire, you built behind my back. Tell them the truth, and I'll let you live. Anthony laughed, a cold, hollow sound that made Grace's skin crawl. Confess to what the lies you've been spreading about me. He turned to address the assembled crowd, Vincent's captains, Anthony's allies, and the undecided observers who had come to witness the confrontation. My brother has lost his mind. He's making wild accusations without any evidence, trying to destroy my reputation because he's afraid of losing power. No evidence. Vincent pulled out a small device, a portable speaker connected to the USB drive Grace had brought from Florida. Stephanie Chen says, "Hello, Anthony." She kept very detailed records. He pressed play. The recording filled the warehouse, Anthony's voice unmistakable, discussing payments to Dr. Patterson, talking about keeping Vincent deaf, bragging about the shadow network he had built inside the family organization. Anthony's face went white. That's fake. Someone manufactured. There's more. Vincent pressed another button. Bank records appeared on a screen that had been set up behind him, showing transaction after transaction flowing from Castellano accounts to Anthony's hidden allies. 23 years of theft, millions of dollars, all documented, all traceable, all yours. The assembled crowd began to murmur. Grace watched the faces of the captains who had been loyal to Anthony, saw their expressions shift from confidence to doubt to horror as the evidence mounted. You had a partner. Vincent continued, his voice cutting through the noise. Someone you called the architect, someone who helped you plan every step of this betrayal. He stepped closer to his brother. Who is it, Anthony? Who helped you steal my hearing? Who helped you build an empire on my silence? Anthony's composure finally cracked. You want to know who the architect is? His voice rose to a desperate shout. Fine, I'll tell you. It was Dad. The warehouse went silent. Vincent felt the words hit him like a physical blow. What did you say? Dad. Anthony's eyes were wild now, tears streaming down his face. He started it. He's the one who found out your deafness could be fixed. He's the one who decided to keep you deaf because he thought it would make you stronger, make you more focused, more dangerous. You're lying. I'm telling you the truth for the first time in my life. Anthony's voice cracked. Dad paid Dr. Patterson first. He set up the whole system. When he died, he made me promise to continue it. Said it was for your own good. Said you'd never survive in this world if you could hear all the noise, all the distractions, all the weakness that sound brings. Vincent stood frozen, processing the impossible revelation. His father, the man he had worshipped, had tried to honor with every decision, had built an entire empire to make proud. That man had stolen his hearing before Anthony ever touched a dollar. I don't believe you. Believe whatever you want. But ask yourself this. How did a 14-year-old kid arrange payments to specialists across the country? How did I have the connections, the money, the power to set something like this up? Anthony spread his hands. I didn't start this, Vincent. I just continued what Dad began. And I did it because I loved you. Because I believed, like Dad believed, that it was the only way to protect you. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 23 years of lies and the weight of an even older betrayal. Grace watched Vincent's face, saw the war between grief and rage playing out across his features. Everything he had believed about his father, about his brother, about his entire life, all of it was crumbling around him. Even if that's true, Vincent said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. You still chose to continue it. You chose to lie to me every single day. You chose to build a shadow empire while I trusted you with my life. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, Anthony. That's what you never understood. Vincent straightened, and Grace saw something harden in his eyes, a cold resolve that hadn't been there before. Our father was wrong. About me, about my hearing, about everything. And you were wrong to follow his path. So what happens now? You kill me, your own brother. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a decision that would echo through the rest of his life. No, I'm not going to kill you. The crowd murmured in surprise. Even Anthony looked shocked. You're not. Death is too easy, too quick. Vincent turned to address the assembled captains. Anthony Castellano is hereby stripped of all rank and position within the family. His assets are frozen. His allies are given one chance to renounce their loyalty to him and return to the fold. Anyone who chooses to stand with him will share his fate. Which is what? Anthony demanded. Exile. You have 24 hours to leave Chicago. Leave the country. Leave everything you've built on my silence. Vincent's voice hardened. If I ever see your face again, if I ever hear your voice again, I will kill you. Not because you're my enemy, but because you were my brother. And that betrayal can never be forgiven. Anthony stared at his brother, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack in Vincent's resolve that he might exploit. He found nothing. This isn't over, Anthony said quietly. Yes, it is. Vincent turned his back on his brother, the ultimate gesture of dismissal. Tommy, escort him out. Make sure he has transportation to the airport, and make sure he understands what happens if he ever comes back. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. Anthony's allies scattered like rats fleeing a sinking ship. The captains who had been wavering rushed to pledge their loyalty to Vincent, eager to distance themselves from the losing side. The evidence from Stephanie Chen's USB drive spread through the organization like wildfire, destroying whatever remained of Anthony's credibility. By dawn, it was over. Anthony was on a plane to somewhere in South America, stripped of everything he had built alone, with the consequences of his choices. The shadow network he had created was dismantled, piece by piece. The doctors who had participated in the conspiracy were dealt with some more permanently than others. And Vincent Castellano sat alone in his study, listening to the sounds of a world he was still learning to navigate. Grace found him there just after sunrise. "It's done," she said quietly. "Anthony's gone. Your organization is secure. The captains are falling in line." Vincent didn't turn from the window. "My father started this." "I know. Everything I believed about him, the man I tried to honor, the legacy I tried to protect, it was all built on a lie." Grace moved to stand beside him, looking out at the city that had been his kingdom of silence for so long. "The lie was his, not yours. You built something real, Vincent. Something that matters. The fact that it started with his deception doesn't change what you've accomplished. Doesn't it?" "No." Grace's voice was firm. "You spent 37 years proving that you were more than your disability, that you could see what others missed, understand what others couldn't hear. Your father thought silence would make you stronger, but you made yourself strong despite the silence. That's your legacy, not his." Vincent finally turned to look at her. "You should hate me. I've brought nothing but danger into your life. Your children were threatened. Your safety was compromised. You've seen things no civilian should ever see. Maybe, but I've also seen something else." Grace met his eyes. "I've seen a man discover that everyone he loved betrayed him, and instead of destroying everything in rage, he chose mercy. He chose exile instead of execution. He chose to break the cycle of violence instead of continuing it. I'm not a good man, Grace. I didn't say you were good. I said you made a choice, and that choice matters." Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folder. "Your husband," he said. "Daniel Williams. I had Tommy's people investigate while you were in Florida." Grace's heart stopped. "What did you find?" "The hit and run wasn't random. It was ordered by a man named Marcus Webb, a corporate attorney who represented the defendants in the case your husband was going to testify in." Vincent handed her the folder. "Webb has connections to people I know. People who owe me favors. With the evidence in this folder, you can take him down legally, or I can handle it my way. Your choice." Grace looked at the folder in her hands, feeling the weight of 3 years of grief and unanswered questions finally coming to a close. "I want to do it legally," she said. "Daniel believed in the system even when it failed him. I owe him that much to prove that the truth can still win." Vincent nodded slowly. "I'll make sure the right prosecutors see that evidence. Webb will be in prison before the year is out." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You gave me back my hearing. You helped me save my organization. You showed me that not everyone in this world is looking for an angle." Vincent's voice softened. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Grace smiled, the first real smile she had allowed herself in days. "Then repay me by being better. By using that organization of yours to do some good in the world. By proving that your father was wrong about everything, including what you could become." "That's a tall order. You've got time, and now you can hear the world telling you which direction to go." Vincent laughed, a genuine surprised sound that seemed to startle even him. "I don't remember the last time I laughed." "Then you should do it more often. It sounds good on you." They stood together in the early morning light, two people who had been brought together by accident and transformed by circumstance. The crime boss who had built an empire in silence. The housekeeper who had refused to look away from someone else's suffering. An unlikely alliance. An impossible friendship. A new beginning built on the ashes of old lies. 6 months later, Grace stood in a courtroom watching Marcus Webb led away in handcuffs. The evidence Vincent had gathered, combined with Stephanie Chen's financial records, had been enough to bring down not just Webb, but an entire network of corruption that had infected Chicago's corporate elite. Politicians resigned. Executives were indicted. The system Daniel Williams had believed in finally delivered the justice he had died trying to achieve. Grace's children stood beside her. Marcus and Destiny, older now, stronger, beginning to understand that their mother had done something remarkable in the months since their father's death. Vincent was there too, standing in the back of the courtroom, watching with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had learned to appreciate justice over vengeance. After the verdict, Grace found him in the hallway. "It's over," she said. "For now." Vincent smiled. "There's always another fight, another injustice, another person who needs someone to see what others miss. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership. The Castellano Foundation, we're going to do some good with the resources I've accumulated over the years. Medical care for underserved communities, legal aid for families who can't afford representation, and a special division dedicated to investigating cases that the system has overlooked. Run by who? By a woman who sees things others miss, if she's interested." Grace looked at this man who had been her employer, her ally, and finally her friend. The crime boss who was trying to become something better. The deaf man who had finally learned to hear not just sounds, but the truth that lay beneath them. "I'm interested," she said. Vincent extended his hand, and Grace shook it. "Then let's get to work." They walked out of the courthouse together into a city that was finally beginning to change. Behind them, the echoes of old lies faded into silence. Ahead of them, the sound of justice was just beginning. And Grace Williams, the invisible housekeeper, who had seen what no one else could see, was finally fully, impossibly visible. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be heard. Others learn to listen in ways that change everything. And sometimes the greatest power isn't in the words we speak, it's in the silence we refuse to accept. Vincent Castellano had been born into silence. Grace Williams had given him back his voice. And together they had discovered that the strongest bonds aren't forged by blood or money or power. They're forged by truth, by courage, by the simple revolutionary act of seeing someone who has been invisible and choosing to help them anyway. That is how empires fall. That is how justice rises. And that is how two broken people can change the world, one moment of compassion at a time.